When a political candidate comes up with what I think is a good idea, I have to call it a good idea.
While that may be a good idea.
Well, something pretty funny just happened on the Fox Propaganda Network because a Fox News host just got the chairman of the Republican National Committee, the top Republican in charge of getting other Republicans, including Donald Trump, elected, to admit publicly on live TV that an economic proposal from Vice President Kamala Harris is a pretty good idea. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. And the protagonist of this story is a really unlikable guy named Michael Watley, who is the co-chairman of the Republican National Committee. Again, the top Republican in charge of getting other Republicans elected. But before I play this really funny and amazing clip, I want to provide some context about the proposal that they're talking about. So according to Reuters, Kamala Harris, the vice president, is to propose up to $50,000 tax deduction for new small businesses. Vice President Kamala Harris will propose a tax deduction of up to $50,000 for new small businesses on Wednesday, a tenfold increase over existing relief and her latest economic policy aimed at winning over middle-class Americans after jumping into the presidential race over a month ago. Harris is aiming to draw a contrast with her opponent, Donald Trump, on broad economic strategy, specifically on tariffs and taxes. Her progressive economic agenda is focused on taxing wealthier individuals and companies more and increased federal funding for childcare and other social programs aimed at working parents. The new plan, to be announced in New Hampshire, will propose expanding the startup expense deduction for small businesses from $5,000 to $50,000, a campaign official said. On average, it costs $40,000 to start a new business, the official said, speaking on condition of anonymity. The United States' 33 million small businesses employ about 46% of all private sector employees, according to the Small Business Association, and were responsible for 70% of new net jobs since 2019. That is the context for this, and it's a pretty big deal. So with that in mind, Stuart Varney, Fox News host, interviewed Michael Watley, again, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, the guy in charge of getting all the Republicans elected and reelected, and got him to make a major concession on live TV.
Really hard to think that she's going to walk back on all of that right now.
I just want to press the point. When a political candidate comes up with what I think is a good idea, I have to call it a good idea. And a $50,000 tax cut for small, not tax cut, but a tax credit for startups or small businesses, coupled with less red tape. I got to say, that is a good idea, regardless of our other tax ideas.
While that may be a good idea, it's hard to see how she's...
It may be a good idea. And of course, he's like, well, it's hard to see how she's going to implement it. But they're going to say that about any tax proposal. That's why, by the way, the vice president has to not only win the presidential election, but Democrats have to keep the Senate and Democrats have to retake the House majority. They're on track to do that in the House. The Senate is going to be an uphill battle, to be sure, even though Senate Democrats are currently leading in most polls. From what I have seen, we have no margin for error. We have to basically win it all. But the fact that Stuart Varney was able to press Michael Watley and get him to concede that this $50,000 small business startup deduction is actually a good idea is a major concession, and it's going to be fodder for the Harris campaign, who, by the way, is already clipping this and making it, make its rounds on social media. That's hilarious. And what makes it even better is it's actually not the first time in recent days that this same person, Michael Watley, co-chair of the Republican National Committee, has inadvertently made an ass out of his cult leader, Donald Trump, by simply reporting facts. And I should say this, Michael Watley is undermining Trump by telling the truth, which is pretty rare for Republican politicians and Republican operatives. And I want to give you another example of where he did just that, however reluctantly, in another recent interview about a separate matter. So Donald Trump recently claimed that, as he's wont to do, that not only did he really win the 2020 election, and that the only reason that Joe Biden is sitting in the White House right now is because of fraud, because they cheated, because it's rigged. But he also says he won so much that if Jesus Christ were counting the votes in California, Donald Trump would have won California too. This is a segment from a recent interview, another follow-up interview between Donald Trump and Dr. Phil McGraw. I'm going to play this clip, and then we'll get into how Michael Watley, co-chair of the Republican National Committee, undermine Trump even on this.
I look at California. I gave a speech. I had a crowd so big. I said, "There's no way I could lose California," but automatically they mark it down if you're a Republican as a loss. That you lose by 5 million votes. I said, 5 million votes. I guarantee, if Jesus came down and was the vote counter, I would win California. Okay.
That's how deluded Donald Trump is. By the way, just as a sidebar before we get to Watley, it says one of two things. As I've said before, I'll say it again. It bears repeating. Donald Trump is either incredibly disqualifyingly stupid to believe that he won California, or he is so disqualifyingly delusional and dishonest. Either way, that statement alone makes Donald Trump unfit to be president of the United States, because either he's irretrievably stupid, which isn't what you want in a chief executive, or he has no relationship with reality as we understand it, which is also pretty bad for a chief executive as well. Either way, disastrous for Trump. And Michael Watley knows it. So he was recently interviewed on The Issue Is by another Fox reporter, Alex Michelson. And this lie or delusion of Donald Trump's was discussed, and Michael Watley reluctantly, uncomfortably, right? He was clearly not happy about this, undermined his cult leader's dishonesty and delusions. Here you go.
We want to make sure that we have volunteers and attorneys that are there anytime votes are being cast or counted.
Should people trust that their vote is going to be counted fairly in California?
Yeah, and that's why we want to be here. And the thing about California law is it does allow anybody who is interested in serving in that capacity to go serve in that capacity, which I think is really good.
Watley's comments just days after Dr. Phil aired this interview with former President Trump.
If Jesus came down and was the vote counter, I would win California, okay? In other words, if we had an honest vote counter.
What does that mean?
Well, I think that he feels like California, there are a lot of Republicans and there are a lot of votes here. I think he was probably, a little bit of a stretch.
Trump lost here by close to 5 million votes. Do you have evidence that he actually won this state, that there were 5 million more people that voted for him that weren't counted?
No.
So that claim about Jesus is
we'll see. And the president can tell stories as at any time. But look, I think the key is that we want to make the point that it is very important for us to have election security protection in place, that we are going to protect the ballot.
There is danger, isn't there, of some people hearing that from the president, thinking, they don't count my vote, it's not fair, and then they don't vote, and then you could lose, right?
Look, that's why we set this program up. That's exactly the conversation.
You just see him looking like in the distance. It sucks to have to be the guy or gal or team or army that's to go in and clean up Donald Trump's rhetorical messes because he's so stupid and dishonest. Although I don't have much sympathy for this guy, given that he signed up for the role. He is co-chair along with Laura Trump, Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, and they're currently making disastrous decisions. Vice President Harris is dominating the polls, dominating in fundraising. Donald Trump continues to disgrace and debase himself in front of the American people, so I don't think they're doing particularly well. But I love the fact that he was confronted on this issue, and he acknowledged that they have no evidence for Donald Trump's claims. As a matter of fact, he basically comes out and says that Trump is lying. Well, the president, and by the way, the former president is free to tell stories. Free to tell stories. Tall tales. Lies, in other words. Same guy. I just love this. I love seeing top Republican operatives humiliated. It makes it even better when it's done courtesy of Fox News. I mean, again, it's like, to me, it's so much more satisfying to see a conservative either intentionally or unintentionally screw over another Republican. And so the fact that Stuart Varney was able to get Michael Watley, a top Republican operative, to admit that this policy proposal of Vice President Kamala Harris is a good idea, I love it. I would love to see more of that. I just don't know. I just love the fact that Donald Trump is setting himself and everyone around him up for such grotesque failure that they're constantly tripping over each other. Great stuff. We need more of that, please, as we head into the election. And in the meantime, of course, let me know what you think in the comments.